Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Finish, where we discuss the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasir. Welcome back, Thanasir.
Salutations and peace. Thank you.
In today's episode, we review the impactful debut of Jacob Fatu in WWE, Drew McIntyre's dastardly attack on CM Punk, and the on-screen return of Bo Dallas as part of the latest Wyatt Sicks developments. We will later discuss our predictions for this weekend's AEW and NJPW Forbidden Door event, discussing whether we believe Will Ospreay will be able to dethrone Swerve Strickland. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. And if there is a certain topic that interests you more than the other, please feel free to jump ahead to it using the timestamps in the description below. On that note, Thanasi, let's dive right into Smackdown. Now, there are a couple points we can discuss here. I'm going to leave it to you as to what you would like to discuss first, which is either the CM Punk stuff or the Bloodline Jacob Fatu stuff. Where do you want to start?
Well, given Jacob Fatu was in the main event of the evening and CM Punk basically opened the show, maybe we should start from the beginning. And if I may, it just felt like there was a certain balance in the force by having Paul Heyman and CM Punk together in a WWE ring again. And I think it was no better summarized than by Paul Heyman himself. So, like, he pointed to Punk and he said, "This is the man who sat next to my children at the Hall of Fame ceremony when I was inducted." So clearly, both within and without of kayfabe, this was a big deal. Um, and I think, to be quite frank, it doesn't actually mean a whole lot in the current storyline because the bloodline angle, the Punk and Drew angle, they're not really going to be interacting very much. So I think it was just a little tidbit, a little tease, a little Easter egg for us, the wrestling fans, to see these two great speakers in the same ring together. What did you think of the segment?
I thought it was a lovely segment. It's kind of a follow-on from Punk's earlier antics where he was sort of laying the groundwork for a potential Roman Reigns bout in the future. Obviously, right now that match is unnecessary to build towards. One of the wrestlers has not appeared since WrestleMania. The other one is still technically out of action, and they're on different brands, so it doesn't make sense to have to tease that any further. What this felt like to me is as you described, reunion of two old friends on screen. This was, I believe, the first time on the weekly television programs that we actually saw these two together. And it's the first time I think we've seen them in the ring since 2013, 14 era. So
2014.
so it's nice to see them come back. And I particularly loved when the Bloodline came out. Obviously, Paul Heyman was coming out as a favor to ask Punk to, leave the premises, so to speak, and he asked for a favor in return, which was to take him with him. And I'm sorry, I'm just laughing because the delivery of the line was perfect. You could feel the depression that is sinking into Paul Heyman as he is without his tribal chief in Roman Reigns. And it was very good. And again, this is something we were talking about last week, but it feels like there's a synergy to the shows. CM Punk shows up on the Bloodline's show. The Bloodline takes offense to it, and Cody Rhodes comes out to sort of even the odds a bit, make the somewhat save. And it didn't feel weird. Like these are characters that have interacted before that are on somewhat friendly relations. And obviously Cody Rhodes is invested in a issue with the bloodline that is persisting. And I appreciated that it's like even with a newcomer or a foreign wrestler coming into the brand, that they're still trying to find a way to mesh it in seamlessly.
I can certainly see that aspect of it, but can we talk a little bit more about the big storyline development on this front, and that is with Drew McIntyre? You see, You had that kind of backstage segment that I was basically skipping through when I was watching the replay of the show, and I had to actually go back to see how it actually began. And essentially, it was quite a brutal, just sudden beatdown at the outskirts of the backstage area, like just right outside. And at least for my part, I found it thoroughly impactful to see Drew McIntyre just go absolutely nuts. They're using this camera style now where it's a one long shot where they follow the talent all the way through and it's one take. And for something like this, where Drew McIntyre beats the shit out of Punk backstage and carries his limp body out to the Chicago crowd to soak in the heat, I thought it was very powerful. Um, of course, it does mean that Drew McIntyre, his claim of quitting, did not actually pan out. His quit lasted all of 4 days, but nevertheless, he's got some really good heat on him, and it begs now the question: how long is Punk going to be out? Because we don't know if they're going to be building up. Well, we thought they would be building up for a SummerSlam contest, but does this mean that Punk is going to be taking some time or some extended time off of TV? There are question marks on that front. What are
I
your thoughts?
Wow. Well, firstly, it was fantastic development. I think it was like a receipt for the Clash of the Castle antics of Punk. So, I'm appreciating the back and forth that is continuing between these two. And to answer your question, at least from my opinion, I think that this is set up perfectly for SummerSlam. Because now it seems Drew's put his attention towards Money in the Bank. There's going to be at least, I think, a 3-4 week gap between Money in the Bank and SummerSlam. Assuming Punk is fit, I think that's definitely going to be the place to do it. And it feels like if it does work out that way, it's almost perfect timing because he missed out on WrestleMania, but he'll make his return at the second biggest show of the company.
Do you think that CM Punk is going to screw Drew McIntyre out of the Money in the Bank contract?
If he qualifies for the match, I think there's a very good chance he does pull a Matt Hardy and show up out of the out of the arena, comes storming in and interferes. Yes, I do think there's a very good chance that could happen. If he doesn't qualify for the match, I'd be curious to see what Drew has in store for himself. But I would like to think that Punk will come come back because these two, it seems, at least for the next little while, are just destined to screw each other over. And I'm very much enjoying that play out.
And potentially with a culmination at inside the Hell in a Cell. Like we're seeing these rumors across the interwebs saying that the Bad Blood pay-per-view is going to be brought back in place of, well, I think it was the Hell in a Cell slot, maybe like in October or
The
something like
September,
that.
October spot or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so that we could be seeing a bloody affair between these two men.
Uh, I, I mean, I'd like to see it, but I'd like to just get the first match between them first before we have to worry about that. Like we were saying on previous episodes, this feels like a very odd rivalry where it almost feels perfect that even one match would be enough to settle the differences because it's been going on in the background for so long. That being said, I would not object to multiple bouts between these two. I think they're very talented. And honestly, I'm very curious as to who is going to finish on top. I feel like they're not stuck between a rock and a hard place in a bad way, but they are stuck between one guy's got lots of momentum, the other guy is a returning star who is, let's be real, probably one of the biggest box office draws in wrestling today. Arguably, only maybe Roman Reigns or The Rock really has more star power than CM Punk. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out. But we've got to address another what seems like star in the making with SmackDown this week, and that was Jacob Fatu making his official debut in the company, and he wreaked havoc on everyone. And when I say everyone, I'm talking about the big players of SmackDown. He took out Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, and Kevin Owens all on his own. I mean, what a way to get yourself started and acquainted with this new bloodline. What did you think about this debut?
This is an extremely powerful debut. I think WWE, I think, was delaying it for a period, and I think one of the concerns was that he might even outshine Solo, given how good he is. And well, like, let's leave Solo aside. I think it was pretty clear this guy is really good. Like the strength, the body. I mean, in fact, I think he's actually leaned up a little bit from based on interviews where I've seen of him prior. I think he's cut down a little bit. So he's clearly getting into the WWE rhythm, similar probably to Tama Tonga as well, who's looking in phenomenal shape. I'm super keen to see how they go with this because essentially you have a whole faction of enforcers, which means you've got a lot of dangerous men in one stable. It's going to be very exciting to see, but it was a big kudos for Jacob Fatu to take out the reigning champion Cody Rhodes, 14-time champion Randy Orton, former Universal champion Kevin Owens in one go. Like it was one guy and he took all three of them out. So he's looking hella strong here.
I think that he is going to be an excellent addition to this new look bloodline. And to your point, I think they've now found their replacement for the Solo Sikoa type character of the previous edition. Now, honestly, having seen this week, I understand some people's concerns that Jacob Fatu could even eclipse Solo. But I mean, as long as you keep the microphone at Solo's hands, I think they'll be able to sell things fine. And I feel like I remember after WrestleMania 39, Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman saying they felt like they were in the third inning of the Bloodline storyline. I think we're starting to really understand what they meant by that. It feels like this thing has legs to it, and they've evolved in a very, I feel, a very appropriate way. It hasn't felt messy or it hasn't felt like an NWO. We're just trying to recapture the magic yet type of evolution of the faction. And everyone's talking about, is this going to lead down the line to Bloodline Civil War? What do you think about that?
What it would be, let's not forget, we have had one instance of Bloodline Civil War at Money in the Bank 2023. That was where the Usos took on Solo and Roman.
I'm
So
talking
this
about though, like not just
so
the
this
two on
could be
two.
a bit more of a
It'd be like a legacy bloodline versus new
kind of like
bloodline.
um NWO Wolfpack and NWO Black and White. Here we're gonna have Bloodline Wolfpack and Bloodline Black and White. So no, but I do agree with you. I actually thought at one point that it might be a good idea to bring back Roman Reigns for SummerSlam. I think there was enough there. However, it's looking more and more likely that, at least in line with a civil war going into war games, indeed, that a Roman Reigns return probably we're not looking at it until the American Thanksgiving around November.
Yeah. Look, I don't know what the chances are of that happening this year, um, but it's very entertaining stuff. I think they're doing very well, and I'm curious to see how it develops. But let's move on to Monday Night Raw, and there is a growing faction on that side as well with the Wyatt Sicks. And this week we saw a VHS tape brought out, which, by the way, made me feel old because Michael Cole had to explain what it is, and I think we're one of the few people that still remember what a VHS tape actually is.
I think we're some of the youngest people to have actually used it.
In any case, the VHS tape revealed essentially a sit-down interview between Bo Dallas and Uncle Howdy. And I want to get your thoughts on this. I found it was a very powerful, uh, a very powerful bit of entertainment, a bit of a video, where Bo Dallas basically just aired his frustrations and his sadness that just when he had the chance to team with his brother, work with his brother, that he was tragically taken away. And there was an interesting tidbit in it that I didn't notice on first watching, but when I saw it again, it picked up. They basically addressed the sort of online potential concern of people thinking this is just them trying to profit off of Bray Wyatt in death. And I was saying, they basically addressed that as well and argued that, this is about making sure his legacy lives on. It's not about profiting off of him posthumously. It's about making sure that the impact he left on the wrestling business and the stories and creativity that he wanted to showcase are not gone. What did you think about all this?
I thought that that was a very, very powerful strand to the, well, I guess to the monologue or the dialogue that was occurring between Bo Dallas's two selves, the Uncle Howdy and the Bo Dallas proper. And I think by calling out this potential for, this potential accusation of you are exploiting the memory of your brother, I actually thought that that was very, very strong for them to call that out at such an early stage, because it really sets the tone of this is what we're trying to do here. And I guess for my part as a fan, I do fundamentally agree with trying to preserve the legacy properly, because it did feel like every time Bray Wyatt had a go at something fresh, some sort of roadblock would appear or things just wouldn't pan out properly. And this is a chance to really kind of crystallize all the creative genius that he had, because it's very easy for us to kind of let it go as it is, never touch it again, and conclude in, say, 10, 15, 20 years that it was the greatest what if story. Now, I guess that's exactly what that's exactly where Bo Dallas was coming from, right? Like this is what we're trying. He's trying to save the legacy of his brother and really trying to crystallize it in the collective memory of wrestling, really. What did you think?
Uh, I completely agree, and I rewatched the Bray Wyatt documentary that WWE released earlier this year as well after this segment, and rewatching that made me realize how important it must be, not just for fans, but for the family to actually keep Bray's memory, have it live on in this format. And it feels like Bo Dallas does actually have a keen understanding of his brother. No one will ever grasp Bray Wyatt's ideas the same way he did. But it feels like if there's anyone that's primed to try and take those ideas and execute them, successfully, it feels like it is Bray Wyatt that it is Bo Dallas that can do it.
I wanted to raise this point, referring to, well, in reference to this segment or this storyline. I think it's good that we had some kind of a development from last week, right? Because it could have been very easy for us to just have like replays of segments, or even for just after Nikki Cross having come out and left the tape on the announce table, just to say, okay, we can't actually find one until next week, so we'll watch the tape next week. Because it's kind of like a candle in the wind deal here, right? We want the flame to be consistently burning bright. We want it to be feeding oil to the flame. We don't want to be, you know how like WWE has this usual style, or it was more typical under Vince, where it was like, let's just squeeze it out as long as we can and see if the fans continue to be interested, even just giving them like tiny little tidbits. Like, no, the iron is hot. Let's keep striking. Let's keep developing week to week. It doesn't mean it has to be multiple segments every week, but it does mean that there should be some kind of a development. And I think either having some kind of a beat down, like an in-ring segment, or a backstage vignette that is fresh, like more tapes, more discs, more videos. I think that we do need to keep this ball rolling. That's my view.
Moving on to some other discussion points for Raw, I wanted to raise this with you as well. We saw Seth Rollins and Damian Priest have another in-ring exchange, in a verbal exchange rather, and there's some stakes that have been put on the line for Money in the Bank, where Seth Rollins has agreed that if he fails, he will never challenge Damian Priest so long as he is champion. But Damian Priest has now agreed to the stipulation that if he loses, he is also out of the Judgment Day, What are your thoughts on this? Because for me, I feel like this has added intrigue to the match between the two. I also feel like it's made it a bit more predictable for me now, but I like the idea of these stakes that have been put on, especially since the Judgment Day does feel like it is in a position of flux. It doesn't feel as settled as it has in the past. So, what do you think about this?
I think overall, adding these kinds of gentlemen's agreements, stakes, whatever, it does add a bit of intrigue into the storyline. But I was already quite confident that Seth Rollins was coming back to put over Damian Priest. So this has just made me even more confident that that's what's going to happen. Um, yes, on the go home show, we could have a bit more of a tease of like Judgment Day in peril or Judgment Day crumbling, something like that. Sure, but my actual big takeaway from this segment was less about the gentleman's agreement and it was more about Gunter coming out towards the end, just as a reminder, because I think you'll recall that this is the right way to have done a segment like this right after King of the Ring, where it's like, yes, you've got number one contender and you've got heavyweight champion of the world going at it, but the King of the Ring is coming. And he's just giving a little reminder to his or to his
Subjects,
to his future opponent, whichever of the two it may be.
to his
And I think
royal
that was
subjects.
to his courtiers,
Yes.
nobles. Nevertheless, um, I, I don't see Seth Rollins being a transitional champion to get the strap to Gunter. I see it more likely that Gunter will be likely crowned at SummerSlam and going up against Damian Priest. That is honestly what I think. And I think that Damian Priest will only look stronger after having defeated Seth Rollins. And for that reason, because he's going to drop the title soon anyway, Seth Rollins not getting another title shot as long as Damian Priest is champion doesn't really matter all that much in the long run.
That's part of the thing that's confusing me about this, though, is because Gunter beating Damian Priest, I don't think would be a satisfying debut world title victory. I think that it like there's no denying it'd be more impactful if he beat Seth Rollins, the same way that for Damian Priest, it's very impactful to beat Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins is an established name within WWE. So that's why I feel like they've booked themselves into a bit of a corner here, and I wouldn't be shocked if there is some sort of transition between Priest and Gunther's reigns. Supposing that Gunther does in fact win it at SummerSlam as we all expecting. And part of that could be the lottery of the Money in the Bank. That's the X factor in here. Maybe the Money in the Bank winner is going to cash in between and rock feathers. Potentially, the Money in the Bank winner is going to cash in at SummerSlam. So it's going to be heel on heel, and then potentially a face Money in the Bank winner intervenes to give everyone that buzz of electricity. I don't know. So I think it's in terms of traditional storytelling of the hero versus the villain, the world title is in a weird position with the Gunter thing laying over everything. So yeah, we'll see what happens from that end. And also, like, we can't forget with Judgment Day, we're talking about the developments. What Liv Morgan is doing, I think, has got everyone up in arms and questioning themselves. It now seems that she's trying to steal Rhea's position within the faction. She helped Finn Balor and JD McDonough reclaim the tag team championship for the Judgment Day. What do we think about that?
Look, to be quite honest with you, I think that as a long run story, this is fantastic because Liv Morgan, I think that her storyline character is out for absolute revenge against Rhea Ripley. She's taken the title and she wants to destroy all the men in her life. And what better way to turn men against each other than to put a beautiful woman between them, right? Because she's trying to seduce Dom. She's teasing, this whole seeing Finn Balor alone in the locker room, helping him win title gold. She's not going to go after JD or Damian Priest, but that's going to happen in time. And once you unsettle two men in the faction, it's very, very easy for the others to kind of start turning against each other as well, picking sides, getting angry. So I think by the time, well, I mean, Rhea Ripley's busy getting engaged right now, but by the
She's
time she's
actually
ready,
married.
did they get married or
They
did
got
they?
married, I believe, on, well, when this comes out, it would have been on Thursday Australian time, or at least that's when we've figured it out. But yeah, I literally saw that post like a minute or two before we started recording. So
Well, I thought that
congratulations
was
to the
just
Aussie couple.
good for them. So after well, given that then it's a marriage, she's probably going to have like a honeymoon or something. And upon coming back, she's going to have to try assert some dominance in the Judgment Day, which may have already crumbled by the time she returns. So she's going to be setting Dominic um, back in line and trying to get some revenge against Liv Morgan's revenge tour.
That's it. I'm very much excited about the about for when Rhea Ripley does come back into the fold. It's been a long time, to be perfectly honest, since it felt like there was a lot of excitement over a a women's storyline for the world title. So I feel like this has the it has all the makings of being a classic wrestling feud between these two ladies. And I think it's going to be dynamite when she comes back. Speaking of dynamite, let's transition to AEW
Ah, what a
and
segue.
and let's discuss AEW NJPW Forbidden Door. Then I see obviously this weekend we have Forbidden Door between, and it's going to see the wrestlers of AEW, NJPW, and I think even some other companies interact with. I believe the Mexican company as well that they've been collaborating with. So
CMLL.
let's get right into it. And to start off, I want to discuss Jon Moxley versus Tetsuya Naito for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. Who have you got going over and why?
Well, see here, I actually thought that we were going to get Konosuke Takeshita being in this one originally, but given that Jon Moxley won the Eliminator contest at the last pay-per-view, means we're going to get him going up against Naito, as Chris Jericho liked to yell. Look, my view on this one is that this is a collab pay-per-view, so I don't see a lot of a high likelihood of lots of title changes. I think Tetsuya Naito is a very, very well-established heavyweight champion of the world from New Japan. I think he might be one of the few people to have held this new version of the IWGP World Heavyweight. He may have actually been the one to unify it, to unify the old IWGP Heavyweight Championship with the IWGP Intercontinental title to create this new lineage. So it's going to be a big win for Jon Moxley here, but my personal view is that Mox is not done as IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, and he'll probably drop it at an NJPW event proper instead of at Forbidden Door. So Jon Mox.
It's interesting for me. I've got Naito going over here, and it's for the sheer reason that I think it's a chance to give NJPW a publicized win within AEW. AEW very frequently wins these bouts and in my opinion, has always gone over. And I think this is a good time to sort of restore the balance and actually make an NJPW man their world champion instead of having an AEW guy as their world champion. So I think Naito is going to go over in this one. All right, well, moving on. You raised him previously. In the next match, we're discussing it's the ladder match for the AEW TNT Championship, which features Konosuke Takeshita, Mark Briscoe, Jack Perry, Dante Martin, Leo Rush, and El Phantasmo. This is obviously there are a lot of variables here, but who do you think's going to get the rub here and become the new TNT champion?
Look, I'll put it this way. What is Leo Rush doing in this match? There's a lot of people in this match, roughly half the participants, I would say, in fact, where I can say, you know what, well deserving if they were to win, right? And I'm thinking of Takeshita, I'm thinking of Mark Briscoe, I'm thinking of Jack Perry. But in storyline, given the dominance of this new elite and the Bucks are the reigning tag champions, the Continental champion is Okada. So I think having an all the gold faction even after they teased it, because they were going to hand it to Jack Perry after the vacancy that Adam Copeland left. I think that Jack Perry's got to be the favorite going into this one.
I completely agree. I think it makes the most sense. I think it's the only one that has momentum behind it, really. I think anyone else winning it, it would feel out of nowhere. With Perry, it feels like, no, they're building towards something, and that could do a lot for him. And I don't know if I'm right in saying this. Would this be his first singles gold in AEW
Did
if
he
he were
have
to
the
win it?
FTW title?
He did have the okay. Well, let me rephrase it. Would this be his first, you know,
Sanctioned.
credible singles title in AEW?
I think it would be.
So,
And
it could represent a big milestone for him in his still very young wrestling career.
oh, certainly. And look, he's got the potential for it, right? I mean, we thought that maybe he'd be a stronger world title contender by this time in his career, but there's still time, and he's still finding his feet in the current gimmick as the scapegoat. So let's see where this particular one will take him as part of the new elite.
The next match we've got to discuss is Mercedes Moné versus Stephanie Van Keur in a winner takes all match for both the AWTBS Championship and the New Japan Pro Wrestling Strong Women's Championship. And for me, this is actually a very easy prediction, and it's part of the reason that I predicted Naito to win the championship from Moxley. And that's because I think Mercedes Moné is going to emerge victorious in this winner takes all match. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, she hasn't had the title all that long, so to have her lose the title just at all is a big deal. Pardon me. I will say this though, it would feel like a certain sense of completion for her to win back the NJPW Strong Women's title because of how she lost it, right? Where, remember how we thought maybe she'd called an audible to give it to Willow. So now it's kind of like, let's rewrite history the way it was meant to be, according to Mercedes Moné. So I think it's a pretty easy one for me to go with. I'm going to go with Mercedes.
Next up, we've got Zack Sabre Jr. versus Orange Cassidy. Uh, I feel, I'd be lying if I said I've been keeping up to date with both of their work intensively, but having seen Zack Sabre Jr. last year battle it out in a fantastic match against Bryan Danielson, I have to believe in this case that he is going to win against Orange Cassidy. So that's where my prediction's going. How about you, Thanasit?
I have to agree with you because I just think that the caliber of wrestler, of technical wrestler that Zack Sabre Jr. is, even going up against the AEW original in Orange Cassidy, he's far too strong. The reputation is far too strong. This one I think is more about a sort of like a marquee match, I would say, as opposed to a storyline development or where wins and losses matter, or you're going to get some kind of a number one contendership out of victory. But I think this one's just a showcase. Let's see what, well, really, technical wrestling can do against traditional professional wrestling sports entertainment.
Next up, we have MJF versus Hechicero. For me, again, this is a quite simple prediction to make. I think, given the star power of MJF, this is his first pay-per-view match back from injury. I feel like it's everything set up for an easy victory here in terms of predictions. What do you think?
I agree with you here. I think it's a point of note that this one is MJF taking on Hechicero, who is from CMLL. And he took on another luchador last week in Roosh, where he defeated him. So MJF is kind of flying the AEW flag against the luchador wrestling, the lucha libre. So I can say I'm pretty confident that he's going to win this one, but without too much of a consequence on this one, right? I think this one's just a little bit of a giving him the rub and returning back to pay-per-view wrestling.
Yeah, and to be perfectly blunt, this match is very unnecessary. Him being on the show makes complete sense, but this feels like a stopgap that is unnecessary, and it's part of my concern with AEW of they book lots of matches. Some matches are very good, but you feel were not required for the pay-per-view. But I
Indeed.
digress. Let's move on to the next match to discuss, and that is Bryan Danielson versus Shingo Tagaki in the first round match of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. And again, we've been agreeing a lot in this video, Thanasi, and I feel like it's going to continue here. I think Bryan Danielson very clearly gets the win here, doesn't he?
Look, I think so. And the reason for it is that, well, the Owen Hart Cup is part of the AEW promotion, right? So to have Shingo Takagi go over means you'd have to keep getting him on AEW television. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it's playing the odds here. You're going with the AEW wrestler to win in the AEW tournament. Like, it's very simple. And of course, Bryan Danielson's a fantastic wrestler, right? So I'm not taking that away from him, but it's purely a strategic prediction in my case.
The next match to discuss is a trios match between the Learning Tree faction of Chris Jericho, Big Bill, and Jeff Cobb versus Samoa Joe, Hook, and Katsuyori Shibata. Thanasi, what do you think is going to happen here?
So I feel kind of bad for the Learning Tree faction because I think originally the plan was to have was it uh Keith, what's his name? Brian Keith
Brian Keith, the
to
bounty hunter.
to be in there instead of Jeff Cole, but they are mixing it up, I think, more for the NJPW side of things. I'm not sure if there is an injury there, so don't quote me. However, I think Samoa Joe has really come into his own as this sort of mentor. And it's good because it's a contrast to the mentoring style of Chris Jericho, right? So for him to get a win here, leading Hook and Shibata, who are, kind of younger than him, I think it would make their side, like the baby faces, look really, really strong. Whereas with the Learning Tree faction getting the win, I don't think that there's a lot to be won there aside from gloating. So I think for storyline progression reasons, I'm going to go with the baby faces.
And for similar reasons, I'm going for the Learning Tree here because you're talking about storyline progression. I think the storyline here is the Learning Tree pissing everyone off by being very tongue-in-cheek. And I think there's no better way to be tongue-in-cheek than getting the win over Samoa Joe, Hook, and Katsuyori Shibata here and claiming dominance, asserting dominance. But yeah, I have a feeling they're gonna give them the win here, but we'll see. Finally, a bit of disagreement again between us. This is good.
I like it.
Let's. I don't know if we're going to be disagreeing on this next match, however, though, and that is going to discuss, and that is Timeless Tony Storm versus Mina Shirakawa for the AEW Women's World Championship with Mariah May in each wrestler's corner. Um, this feels like a soap opera, doesn't it?
Well, this one's got vibes of was it WrestleMania um 5, the explosion of the Mega Powers, where
With Miss Elizabeth,
I
yeah,
think Miss Elizabeth was, yeah, she was
yeah.
basically supporting both participants in the match, both her husband and her friend in Hulk Hogan. So that's the vibe that I'm getting from this one. But that being said, it's all about this sort of Mariah May being caught between the two, right? That's what all this is about. And I'm really keen for the story aspect of this one because the storytelling has just been so strong and like just like so enjoyable. So having her caught in the middle, I think is going to be is going to allow for a lot of development, hopefully to what we've been talking about for months, and that's for her to get a big moment at Wembley. But yeah, so my prediction here, for the reason that it's going to be just a storyline focused match, is champion retains, timeless Tony Storm wins.
The comparison you brought to the Mega Powers match at WrestleMania 5 is actually very appropriate, I feel, because I think a very similar thing could happen in the favor of the heel here, which is that Mariah May inadvertently, is attacked, is assaulted in some way. And I could imagine Tony Storm not caring about her and using it as a distraction to get the victory over um Mina Shirakawa in this match. So I actually think that's going to be the storyline that they're telling, and this will sow the seeds of dissension between the champion and her protege leading into Wembley. So I think that's what's going to start happening here. But we'll see what happens, and let's move on to the next match, which is going to be the Elite versus the Acclaimed, and I believe Hiroshi Tanahashi as
That's
well.
right.
So another trios match. Why we have two trios matches on a pay-per-view, I do not know. But, you know, here we are, here we stand. And, I feel the Elite are definitely going to get this one. I think they're doing very well. They're riding the momentum. They're on top of the company. And I think that's going to be displayed even more so here as well. What do you think, Nancy?
Look, I'm going to have to agree with you on this one. Like, I don't see anything else or any real need for this match, to be quite honest with you. But having the Elite here, probably they're going to have, like a triumphant moment, and in line with my other prediction with Jack Perry getting the win. So just a sweep of victories for the Christian boys
And okay.
and also Jack Perry.
All right, well, that brings us into the main event for Forbidden Door, or at least what I predict will be the main event, and that is Swerve Strickland versus Will Ospreay for the AEW World Championship. And I say it's come a lot sooner than we expected, but here we are. These are two favorites within the AEW camp. Where do you see this one going?
To be honest, I like you said, like it's crept up on us, like it's come quite quickly. I don't think that right now is the moment for Will Ospreay to become heavyweight champion of the world. And I can't quite put my finger on it, aside from to say that I just think that it would make a lot more sense for it to occur in London at Wembley. And because this is not in London at Wembley, I have to go with Swerve Strickland getting the first win. Yes, maybe like a rematch down the line, maybe like a best of three series, something that involves a repeat game. But at least in this first instance, doesn't even have to be clean. Doesn't even have to be clean. I think Swerve Strickland is going over and will get the victory in the main event.
I think Will Ospreay is going to be made champion. I don't necessarily think it's the right place or the right time, but I also don't think having Will Ospreay lose is a smart decision. Now, I understand that there are ways, people could argue sport entertainment ways to protect the champion. You could even have uh, a potential breakup between Don Callis and Will Ospreay, interference that completely severs the ties between Ospreay and the Don Callis family as a way to keep it on Swerve. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think Will Ospreay is going to be made champion, and he would be a great AEW champion, no doubt. I also think that they've gone too quick and fast with these marquee matches, but you can see on the real thing that they're selling on TV right now is the potential match down the line of Will Ospreay and MJF. And you have to imagine that they're going to want to make that as big as possible. And I could even foresee that happening at Wembley. I know that they teased Daniel Garcia versus MJF at Wembley. But things change. Like I really don't know how this is going to go down, but I think Will Ospreay as the champion is the best bet you have of turning MJF into a bona fide heel again. And I just feel like maybe the time has come where Swerve's going to drop it, for better or worse. Could be there. So can I say that, that those are our predictions for this show. Hopefully it's going to be lots of entertainment and something that is going to give us plenty of talking points coming out of it. Let us know in the comments below what you think is going to happen at Forbidden Door. Well, Thanasi, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we will be reviewing the events of AEW and NJPW Forbidden Door. We're going to be discussing everything that happens, especially very keenly what happens in the main event scene. I'm very excited about that. And again, from the WWE side, we'll see how things are developing as they very quickly approach Money in the Bank. It's a very exciting time for us here. It always seems to be in wrestling, isn't it? There's always something around the corner.
When you've got two big national promotions, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Great to have your company as always, Thanasi.
Oh, peace be with you, my child.
Uh, thank you, Father. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.